Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about episode 6 of season 2 of HBO's The Leftovers. Join me, won't you? So, per usual, I'm planning on covering a few of the positives from this week's episode, then a few of the negatives, and kind of wrapping up with what I'm looking forward to next week on The Leftovers. Before I do that, though, I just have to comment, how cool is it that Perotta gets to continue on his creation of The Leftovers, but in this different medium of television? Because as we know, the first season of The Leftovers covered his entire book. So now, going forwards into season 2, it's not only cool that he's able to continue his story, but also that he's able to adjust and adapt to some of the changes that were made for the television show. So for instance, the characters of Matt and Nora in the book were actually not brother and sister. An alteration that has really been made the most of, especially on this episode, and that excellent scene between Matt and Nora in the migrant camp. It was really great for them to have that sibling dynamic because it really allowed Matt to see Nora in a specific way and call her on things that other characters in her life really can't. Jumping back to the top of the episode, I love how it began with that picture of the girls. It really clearly said straight off the bat, this is where our focus is returning to. And I have to say about the entire episode going forwards, yes, this is the sort of episode that really highlights the brilliance of and the sort of payoff we get from the style of storytelling that Lindelof and Perotta love, which is spending all this time with these individual characters in a very segmented sort of way. The way I like to think about it is if these two guys are master chefs, they essentially have been each episode kind of slicing and dicing the tomatoes, slicing and dicing the cucumbers, cutting up the meat, cooking that separately, and now here's the episode where all those pieces come together. And boy, was this a pressure cooker of an episode. And in a lot of ways felt a lot like the penultimate episode from season 1, where we had spent all this time getting to know each of these characters and really felt for them individually as each of their worlds was just ripped apart. And so now, all that meticulous planning, that legwork, and that beautiful character development that's happened in previous episodes is able to pay off in such beautiful ways, like in the scene between Erica Murphy and Nora Durst, which was just brilliant. So it doesn't feel contrived or forced, but utterly natural and thrilling when Erica Murphy says to Nora Durst, well, come on in and ask them. And that's been done by allowing us, the audience, to not only know the practicals that are required for a scene like that to logically happen and logically take place, such as Nora Durst being a DSD agent, but also allowing us to emotionally understand where each character is coming from leading into that scene. So in this episode, for example, we really have moment after moment, interaction after interaction that really try and test Nora Durst, like the one between her and the scientist, which I found to be really well written, just having a great realistic build to it. Or just the fact that they're really utilizing all the battle lines that were drawn up last week. I mean, we've got Nora Durst chucking rocks through windows, for goodness sake. The war is on. Also, on Erica Murphy's side of things, I felt like they did a great job in this episode of presenting how isolated and alone she feels. And it really made sense of why she would turn to someone like Nora Durst in that moment. Just as Regina King said in an interview recently, I feel like she doesn't have anyone else to reveal herself to in that moment. There was that moment where she recognized that this woman and I could possibly share something similar. And so when a scene like that starts, you're just rubbing your hands together with anticipation because you know how rich of an experience you're going to get watching it. Because it's not just about the words that are being said, but how they're being said, and why they're being said, and what's not being said, and just the looks on their faces, which in this episode I thought were beautifully captured by Craig Zobel, the director, and those beautiful, beautiful close-ups. A random side note, there's this thing called the Bechdel test, created by this woman, Alison Bechdel, who after studying film and television for a number of years, discovered that in less than half of those, there were actually scenes between two women where they talked about something other than a man, which makes this scene all the more unique, I think. And I really could go on and on about the brilliance of that scene, but I'll kind of wrap it up with another quote from Regina King where she kind of explains some of the truth behind that scene, and one of the main reasons why that interaction played out and worked so well. Sometimes we act the way we do because it's really painful to see ourselves in someone else, because we might see something we don't like. Which was yet another element that was handled so eloquently this week, as they presented these two families, the Murphys and the Garveys, and just showed how similar they were, which therefore made their inability to communicate and to connect all the more tragic. So whether it's scenes like the one where Kevin's clearly continuing to withhold things from Nora, even though they're in bed together, and then cutting to a scene where Erica and John ultimately embrace, and still you know there are a lot of things that have remained unsaid between them. Or even subtler connections like having Nora grapple with the idea of lensing and feeling like she may be responsible for some of the terrible things that have happened to Kevin. And then, cutting to Erica kind of having to take responsibility for her husband John's actions when she's stitching up that man that he beat. Another moment that I really loved from the episode, though it was brief, was the phone conversation between Nora and Laurie. And not only did it prove to me anyways that Laurie and Tom are definitely going to make their way out to Texas, it really presented Laurie in a way that will allow Damon to continue to unveil her story in the way that he does best. That being, he loves characters that have a secret, who we don't know everything about, and who we kind of need to catch up with. So whether it's not knowing exactly what happened to Laurie and Tom, and where she's at, and why she's taken up smoking again, or the opening scene and not knowing exactly who that scientist character was, or what he was doing with those experiments, or what exactly made Kevin jerk away from Nora when they were in bed together. Lindelof really loves to just drop us straight into the middle of a scene because it forces us to pay attention and invest all the more. And also, it allows us to discover things alongside the characters in their shoes. But he doesn't do that just by cutting out the beginning of a scene. In this episode, that same effect is achieved as Erica chases after the young man who left the pie on their porch, without her hearing aids in. And we're totally with her, having to figure things out without all the pieces, or in this moment, all the senses fully there. Another one of the great things about the shifting points of view episode to episode is you're able to see these different characters doing some of the same things, but kind of have a very different takeaway the different times that you see them. So for example, in episode 4, Kevin's episode, we're very much in his mind and seeing things through his eyes, literally seeing Patty, empathizing with him as he resists acknowledging her presence, and standing next to him as he finally relents and kind of rationally converses with her. And though I definitely admit that a lot of those moments felt very mysterious, they didn't scream, to me anyways, oh good gracious, this man must be placed in the loony bin now. Whereas on this episode, when we see Kevin through Nora's eyes, arguing with some invisible force about how to remove wallpaper, he suddenly looks a lot crazier. Oh, and that is why the writing is so brilliant on this show, because that is so life, right? Something that is so clear and evident to us can be completely different looking to someone else from their point of view, and that struggle to find and take hold of truth will ever be present with us. And speaking of uncovering truth, I loved the fact that Kevin finally came out and told Nora the truth about Patty. And I first of all loved the placement of that scene, because again, it just felt so real that those characters were on completely different pages going into that moment. Kevin had no way of knowing where Nora had just come from, and she had no way of knowing what he was struggling with. And when Kevin said, "This started to happen when you moved in," oh, if he only knew what Nora had been struggling with this entire episode. Also, what I love about that scene is what it does for the show going forwards. We really have seen what it looks like when Kevin and Nora are on different pages, and all the different things that they can do to hide their lies from one another. But now, what does it look like when they get on the same page and are forced to change and move forwards? Lindelof really did give us something new and interesting at the top of this season by introducing new characters and new locations, so it's great to see that he's not resting on his laurels, but continuing to evolve and change things. To actually contrast what I just said, I actually really do enjoy the balance that is brought about from the simplicity of certain relationships. Like, I love how undramatic Jill and Nora's relationship is. And I absolutely love Jill and Michael, who are kind of turning into what seems to be star-crossed lovers. Please don't kill one of them, Lindelof. Another one of the things I felt like Lindelof has learned from Lost, especially in season 6, is just the importance of pacing the revelation of answers and not waiting to dump all of those on us in the last 2 episodes. In this episode, for example, we did get specific answers on what's up with the bird in the box, what's up with the goats, what's up with the wedding dress, what's up with Virgil, why was John in jail? Which does segue into the one kind of halfway negative note I have for the episode, which was the gym scene. And again, it felt like Lindelof was just feeling a little bit insecure, feeling like he needed to tell us versus show us the answers to these questions. But again, it's only halfway negative because Regina King is so brilliant in that scene and is so committed. She really does sell it. As far as things I'm looking forward to next week, I really cannot wait to find out more about Virgil and his relationship to the Murphys and why John shot him. Obviously, I'm curious where Tom is at, and I'm now utterly convinced that we're going to get some epic, long conversation between Laurie and Kevin. It's gonna happen. Also, I'm convinced that Nora has definitely not ruled out the possibility that she is a lens, responsible for the departures that have happened around her, and I'm really curious to see what the next step in her journey will be. And oh man, this war is on. Rocks are being chucked through windows right, left, and center, and I am so excited and terrified to see how all this will come to a head. And just because I'm nowhere near as brilliant and as articulate as the excellent actors on this television show, I'm going to close things out with another quote from Regina King, where having just learned that her character at one point was planning on leaving her husband and children, she said, "I've met men and children who have been in situations where their wife or mother had left them. And it always made me wonder, how could she do that? Where does that come from?" So it gave me the opportunity to tackle something I've never explored before. Which is why I love this television show, and I'm taking the time and effort to talk to you about it right now. It just so poignantly and bravely captures the world around us in so many different points of view, and allows me to experience things that I haven't experienced, and perhaps never will experience, and that's really important. those are my thoughts anyways on this week's episode. I would love to know what you guys think, so please comment below. Let me know what were some of the standout moments, what were some of the moments that didn't work for you, what are you looking forward to next week, any grand theories. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But, for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.